everyone, and welcome to the Home Church podcast. Here at Home Church, we believe that everyone needs Jesus and everyone needs a home. So we hope that you'll open your hearts and your mind as you hear the message today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our podcast today. I'm so glad that you're joining us. If you like this content today, make sure you share it on social media. Today, we have a special guest with us, Monica Prescott, Pastor Monica Prescott. Got to add that in there, from City Life Church in Leduc. And her husband, Mike, have been pastoring there for 27 years. Yep. And if I dare say so, I think it's one of the greatest churches in Canada. They are friends of ours, really since about 2 years before that 27 years began. So 29 years ago or so.
29 when Jachin was 3.
I was 3 years old and causing problems in the pastor's kid category at church. And Mike and Monica actually came to our Bible college here.
Yeah, that's right.
And then planted a church in Leduc, which is about an hour and 10 minutes away from Red Deer here where we are. And they have been just the best friends to our church and to Beck and I in the last 10 years. And so we're so thankful for you, Pastor Monica.
Oh, it's great to be here,
And
Jachin.
so welcome to the podcast.
Cool.
And today we're going to go all over the place. I got a list of things, and we may not end up where I think we will. But I think it's going to be really helpful to anyone in leadership or pursuing leadership, just hearing the story, the journey, as well as anyone who's planted a church, or if you're a woman in ministry or pursuing ministry. I think hearing Pastor Monica's voice is a great voice to listen to and hear just what God's done in her life. So Pastor Monica, just tell us your story of church planting and moving to Leduc and all of that.
The whole story.
The whole story.
Whole story in 2 minutes.
Sure.
Sure. We had December 1991. Yes. Mike and I, we were at Bible school. It was early in the morning. We had just sat down, and it was after early morning prayer. We sat down and we kind of wrote out our 10-year goals. I have no idea why we did it that morning. And we're like, graduate from Bible school in the next year. We were getting married in coming up May, so 5 months away. And we had just wrote out, 1 year we'll be done Bible school. We'll be we'll be maybe working around the church, doing something else. And then maybe 5 years we'd go to another church plant in the area to see what it was like to plant a church. And then maybe 10 years down the road, we would be ready to plant a church. And not 30 minutes later, your father, Mel Mullen, calls us into his office and is like, we want to send you out and plant a church. You guys are getting married in May. We'll send you out next spring. I know, 30 minutes later. And we're like, Mike was like, yeah. And I cried for 3 days.
Yeah. Don't blame me.
It was scary. And so
Wow.
we had no clue what to do. And we had one book we read on church planting. And, so you do what you do. You kind of go up and you knock on doors and you give invites. And we had, our first meeting up there was in May 19th. And we had taken Bible school students up. We just knocked on doors and invited people out to a healing crusade, because that's what you did back in those days.
Exactly.
You have a healing meeting and people come out and, And so a week before the healing meeting, Mike was working on a job site. He was working construction, and a big beam fell on his head.
Oh my
and
goodness.
Drove him. My husband's big guy, tall guy, and drove him into the ground and kind of knocked him out. Well, he was in a neck brace, and so he was supposed to preach. So preaching at a future pastor, preaching at a healing meeting with the neck brace. And
wow.
Yeah, and so that was an interesting night. So he was high on painkillers, and he took the neck brace off.
Healing meeting where you need healing.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So anyway, we had 50 people there that night. Only 2 of them were from Leduc.
Okay,
And one of the ladies we met there, she attended another church, but she's like, you know what, this is so exciting. You can use my house, my basement for Bible study, whatever. And so as we did, we just, all summer long, we just knocked on doors, and we had a survey to find out about the community because we didn't know anything about it. And we just invited people out to church, and it was ridiculous. Now it's everything you don't do.
Right.
And so we just didn't know any better. And so we literally knocked on every door in the city at the time over the next year, 2-3 years. And we started with, the first person, we had this adult Bible study plan, like for our first start at church. And we only had 2 children come, a 7-year-old girl and her 5-year-old brother, both of which are still part of our church today.
Amazing.
I know. It's kind of crazy.
Is wild.
So it's actually, I tell people it's only by the grace of God that it's a miracle there's actually a functioning church there today, because we had no clue what we were doing. And so,
Well, I remember, it would have been, I mean, I'm trying to think how old I am, but I remember driving up with Carol Apt.
Yes.
On a Sunday morning,
So
to
fun.
lead worship with Carol.
Yep. She was so faithful.
And, it was in a school. It was probably about a year into.
Yeah, it would have been about a year.
Came up a few times. And, it's amazing to see what God has done.
Yes.
And the strong church that is there today.
Wow.
From what I saw.
There wasn't much to
in those first days. But also something that just impresses me, or is impressed on me. I mean, you talked about the 5-year-old and the 7-year-old.
Yeah.
But I remember there's a few couples there.
Yeah.
Even though like in that crowd, or you can't even call it a crowd.
It was not a crowd. It was like an
small
oversized small group.
In that small group, there's people that were there that are still with you today. And of course, there's lots of people that aren't there.
Right.
For all sorts of different reasons.
Yeah.
But what does it mean? Just tell me about some of those people and, what they've meant to the church through 27 years.
Yeah.
And how really, I mean, I always think, well, the church wouldn't be there without Mike and Monica, but I always think the church wouldn't be there with those faithful people.
So true.
Just tell us a little bit about that and what that means to you.
Yeah. It's really actually quite amazing. It's actually it's humbling in a lot of ways that you think people, because especially some of the ones that were there are still there now were like much older than we were. And yet they actually saw something in, some 20-year-olds that was worth following, which that's only the grace of God.
Yes.
Because there's, it's like, well, no, we can't give you marriage counseling because we're clueless, we haven't even been married a month. But even some of the people that have been, we met knocking on doors that are there, and people that have been key part of team, and just there's something about faithfulness and there's something about that longevity and where you go through seasons where, you're closer in some seasons and then you're not so close and then you're closer again. And it's just, it really is, you just see that it's really the gift and the grace of God to be able to see people and to walk and to see what God's done in people's lives too, that they haven't just, they don't just kind of coast. It's been 20 years where they're growing and there's transformation in their own lives. You just see where, it's actually a huge honor to be able to see that same God, what God's doing in their lives and that journey, and how some of them, like the little kids growing up, and now they have their own family and their own daughter who I was actually looking.
Some of them,
their grandkids, and I was just looking at the 7-year-old who. I think her daughter now is probably 7, maybe even 8, but I'm thinking, you were the age your mom was when she first came to church. And it sounds like it's a lifetime, but yet at one hand, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago. And so there's just that value of, and it's something we don't say enough, but that value of you recognize that they're going to have like big, huge, big fat thrones in heaven for their faithfulness. And
I believe that.
And sticking with something like that for the journey, and not even really knowing what is this going to last. And yet, it has. And it's been, we love it.
Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing.
It's amazing too to see on the other side of that.
Yeah.
The health that brings to their family.
Yes.
I think one of the deceptions that people fall into is that, when you go through a tough time or something, is, I got to find something else or whatever. And, people all of a sudden, their commitment to church waivers and stuff like that. And oftentimes it's like less than a year and you can see the effects on their kids and they're now praying. Yeah. God help me with my family. Yeah. Exactly. I really think like it's dual sided where, we're thankful for those people. And at the same time, like they're being rewarded. Like I can say this out of
Yes.
our life with,
Yeah.
you know, Levi, who's 16.
Right.
Like we're thankful that we have kept our lives planted in the
Yes.
house
Oh gosh.
for our
Yeah.
sake,
Yeah.
but for our family.
Yes.
And
There
the,
is
the
something.
fruit of it is
Yeah,
obvious.
it is. And you can see it
Yep.
in those. It's so exciting when you just see these families who are now, their grandkids are coming to church. And
Yeah.
you just see those generations where, you know, they would have been young families
Yep.
or the kids were young, but they're stuck with it. And now they're grandkids. You
Yep.
just see the layers of generations in church. There's
So
something really
good.
there's something very powerful about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, last week, you know, Becca and I celebrated 10 years.
That's
which
what's
is
so exciting.
nothing compared to 27. You know, it's like, that's pretty weenie.
27
in
still sounds
comparison.
weenie in a lot of ways compared to the longevity of even your mom and
Yeah,
dad.
absolutely. Totally.
Yeah.
But even in that 10 years, you know, there's a lot of people that came up to us this last week and said, you know, we came the first Sunday.
Oh, wow.
Or, you know, we came
Yeah.
like a month after you started.
That's so great.
And we looked at you and thought, wow, he's young. You know, that's like, I had these like hilarious conversations with people, but yet they knew that, like, even though in some ways they knew
Yeah.
that I was young and maybe didn't have it all together,
Right.
that there was a call of God,
Yeah.
and they believed in
Yes.
us through that. Just want to take a second and just say thank you to all the faithful people out there
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
you know, I really believe, as you were talking about the reward,
Yeah.
that they're going
Yeah.
to, you know, a lot of people think, well, there's a reward for the pastor. I believe there's just as much
gosh.
reward
Yeah.
for it's being faithful to the calling
Yes.
that God has put in your life.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think that is a amazing thing. What was the turning point for you guys? Like, you know, there's obviously you started church planting before it was popular
Yeah.
and before there was plans,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like the good plans, the
Yep.
financial plans.
Yes. Oh gosh, the plans period. Like here's a strategy.
It's just like, you're going to Leduc, you know? So,
Yeah.
and then, you know, I got to witness it, you know, the struggle of that.
Yep.
You know, you may want to talk about just your worst day in that or something like that, but also what was the turnaround point for you guys where like the church really started to move and
Yeah.
grow and take roots in the community?
I think there were two turning points. One is a spiritual and one is a practical. And it's really interesting. I remember the first couple years in one of the seasoned pastors in our life that I remember he said, the first 3 years, God is working on the minister. You can be doing everything
Wow.
right and you don't see a lot because God's working on your heart.
Yep.
And that stuck with me. And
Yep.
it's interesting because it would have been the third year in where it went boom.
Wow.
And it was a switch. And it wasn't like this massive, I mean, compared to now, but it was like a huge jump. And it was like, okay, that kind of makes sense now. And it was something that changed. And I think it was actually, and it was also the year we would have been officially ordained.
Okay. Yep.
And so, I mean, it's kind of like, that's a super spiritual side of it. But I actually think there is something
I
to
believe
that.
that.
I really do. There was a different level of anointing. It had nothing to do what we
Yep.
did. It was everything of God's like, okay, you're faithful. Boom, here you go.
And
But
there
then-
is something about, we don't talk about it enough nowadays, but there is something about the laying on of hands
Yeah, there is.
and the impartation that comes
Yep.
in that.
Because there's so much, I think there's so much an intangible dynamic of authority
Yep.
that isn't just about how, there's the practical side of it. There's the side that how you carry yourself, all of the things that we can do naturally and how we communicate and what we do and don't do and how we carry ourselves or even how you dress, all of those things. But then there's the spiritual side that it's just, you know when somebody's got it and when they don't. And
Right.
it's not like, oh, you're good, you're bad or anything like that. But there is something to be said.
And then there's the whole, you know, fan into flames,
Yeah.
the gift
Yes.
that was given to you
Yeah.
by the laying on of hands,
And nurture that.
which is an interesting whole thought of just, you know, sometimes when you're doing ministry, sometimes you can think, well, I'm doing this. And it's like, you actually don't realize how much gifting has been passed into your life
Exactly.
that you didn't really earn.
Yeah.
You know, I think about the people that have laid hands on me through the years or spoken into my life.
Oh, yeah, you had a
or
lot of
imparted
those.
Lots.
Yes.
And then you start to look at it and you go, wow, I'm a combination of a lot of different
Yeah.
people that have sown.
Exactly.
so
It's like that.
generously.
Very generously. And it's humbling because you realize I
humbling.
did not deserve
Right.
this. You couldn't
Yep.
manufacture this. There's a
Yep.
lot we do grow, a lot we nurture practically, but then there's a whole dynamic where you're just like, whoa, I did not have a part of that at all. Like that was just
Wow.
God's grace and
So
God
amazing.
enabling. And so that was
So that year 3 was kind of a turn.
year 3 was a real turn. And then it would have been about 4 years later. And it was another connection that we had at a particular time to another ministry and being able to see that in a way that we had never, it's just like, whoa, it's like, okay, this is something. It's like, now we could kind of see what I've always seen in my head. And I think Mike had said, he goes, I've seen how, he said, now that's like how I want church to be. And I've seen that and now we can build that. And so that was just a real turning point for us. And I think it was just learning about leadership in a different way and a different capacity to be able to just recognize that, oh, okay, this is something I haven't seen before. This is something new and something fresh. And so I think it was a turning point even for the church too, where it's like there's some stuff that it's like, okay, this is something we haven't considered before, a new way of doing this or a new approach. It brought fresh life to us. It got exciting for us. Yeah.
Yeah, and it helps to have, not that just that you get it, but that was something that you could lead your team.
Exactly.
And it's something your team could see.
Yeah, and I think that was a big part of it. It's like we got language. It's like, okay, this is language for what we've thought in our head. Because a lot of times stuff gets stuck in your head. You're like, how can I articulate this? And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, for me as a leader. It's like stuff gets stuck and it's like, how can I get people to see what's inside my head? But then when you get around people who have put good language, it's like, you just described what I've seen in my head. Now I've got language to know how to communicate that. I think that's such a big part of leadership, is surrounding yourself with people that, they're putting words to things that you maybe didn't have words for before. And now it's like, now I have language to communicate that, to be able to paint the picture for other people.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I see in you guys that's unique, I don't know if unique is the right word, but I think you've done really well, is that, you're talking about that ministry that you saw and, and have, connected to and all that. But I think you guys have also been yourselves as well. It's like you're not all of a sudden a copycat of some other ministry, which you see that happen sometimes, where there's just like it's like a copy, but it's not the real copy. And so you've done that. How have you kind of how have you learned, and at the same time just known, this is who I am, this is what God does through me, and let that kind of flow without
It's kind of interesting.
Without being a photocopier of, because there's so much. I mean, all you got to do is go on social media today.
Oh gosh.
And, you can copy so much stuff if you really wanted to, but it's not, like it can come out so dry and stale if it's not like really birthed in your spirit.
I think some of it actually is probably the artist side of me, because I think that creative artist side, basically you just kind of steal little bits here and there and here and there. There's never anything original. Totally. Nothing original is actually original. It's like a conglomeration of a whole bunch of different things that you bring together and you put it, and the output is like, it's something fresh and new. And I think that's kind of contributed to like that natural side of that giving. It's just like, it's like, oh, I'll take a bit of this and we'll take a bit of this and take this. It's like, boop, there you go. It's something completely different and something unique. And so I think just that's helped a lot too. I think there's a part of me that I do like to copy, but I always like to put my own spin on it. Maybe it's that kind of stubborn individual first child. I'll do it my way.
I like it. Whatever it is you're doing, keep doing it, because it's amazing and it's bearing fruit. And that's at the end of the day. Right. It's not about being the coolest church or this or that. It's really about, who's coming to Christ, who's getting discipled, who's getting delivered,
who's being transformed. Right. God, how are we
seeing the fruit of all those things coming together is really what it is. What is 27 years, what's the most rewarding part of pastoring and sticking that out? 27
years.
Years.
It feels like a lifetime.
Well, it is
really
a lifetime.
does. I
Yeah.
know. One of the coolest things, and it never ceases to amaze me, is when you start seeing the connections of how this person was connected to this person and this person and this person, and you see that, well, this person, when they either get planted in the church, they get saved, and they come and they get plugged in, and then the connection of this one to this one to this one, it's like the whole 6 degrees of separation, from everybody. And I've seen more and more of those connections. Like somebody comes in new to church now, and you realize they were connected to this person who was connected to that one, and just seeing that web of connections. I love that. Because you think there's no way that, like, only God could create and connect these stories together. I love seeing that.
And then you find out that, God put someone in your path that, you definitely had an impact on.
Yeah.
There was like 5 or 6 people along the way that had been sowing seeds.
Yes. And then you realize,
it's a very small world.
It is a super small world. Very small world. Yeah. And we just even witnessed that again a couple weeks ago, where there was this person come in and they've been in church for a while, and then this one's like, they showed up random. It's like, you go to church here too? And then they find out there was another person who was the connector point for both of them. And I love that. I love the stories. I love seeing how the stories are woven together. And I think there's probably layers of stories that are connected that we don't even realize.
Totally.
But for me, that is super exciting, because that just is a reinforcement for me that, God, you're the one that's building your church. Like, we can't orchestrate this. We do our part. But God, ultimately, you're the one that builds your church. You're the one that knits people together for reasons and for seasons that we might not even realize, but they become provisional relationships for key parts, for key seasons in our own life and in our journey, that we need those people.
Totally. Yeah, that's so awesome. So, that's rewarding. What's been some of the hardest parts for you?
I think seeing people that you really had thought were with you for the long time.
Right.
Go walk, go funny, go funky. There's always that. And, for whatever that. And I also seen the same time, we've always been really big for just big open door. It swings really wide both ways, and and that you see those people come back. That's been rewarding. That's been exciting. I think one of the hardest things is, when you're planting, there's an aloneness, I think, that you feel that's different. Like, there's always that type of aloneness when you're leaders feel, just in general, there's that you totally feel alone because you are, in a way. I mean, you are, but you're not. But I think the aloneness when you're church planting is a little bit different than any other type of leadership, partly because it's a different kind of weight. And even you can have other pastors, there's that affinity of, I know what that feels like, that aloneness. It's different. And I think I can kind of compare it to how a parent of a special needs child might feel. Where you might have other friends who their parents as well, but it's different. Like, there's a different weight. There's a different, unless you have that, unless you've been through that, you just don't quite get it. I think that was the hardest part in the early years. I think not so much now, because we're not so much planting, but in the early years, I think that was probably one of the hardest things, is you're surrounded and people are like, yeah, we're with you. It's like, yeah, but I don't think you really do. But the pastors who are planting at the same time is like, you get me. It's like, yep, you get it. Some of it you can't really articulate, but I think that was the hardest part. I think
it's funny how that is. I think, it doesn't really matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
People that are going through the same thing.
Yeah.
You do have an interesting, special connection.
Yeah.
Like, I was just on the phone yesterday with a friend who, like, here I was 10 years ago, taking leadership of kind of a hub church.
Yeah.
And my friend, probably 3 months after that I took leadership here, he took leadership of a hub church. And we've been really good friends this 10 years. And literally we call each other and he says, what's going on right now? And I say, well, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on. And he goes, well, that's funny because, like just facing the same things.
Same challenges.
Yeah. And there is something about, like there's something different about, like even talking with my parents about when they planted this church.
Yeah.
Some of the things that they had to fight, some of the things they had to like go through, defeat, all that, and just kind of barely make it.
Yeah. Yes.
is totally different.
It is.
And then I think of someone who's like transitioned a church like we have.
Yeah.
It's a totally different thing too. That's got
it's very different.
interesting challenges along
Yep.
the way.
Its own set of dynamics.
Podcast coming, people. Podcast coming at some point in the future. But pretty cool. So when I'm around anyone from City Life, there's a fun element, like
a naughty element.
There's a
probably.
naughty element. There's a sharp element.
Sharp in what way?
Sharp in dress.
Oh, okay.
Sharp in
that's good.
like sharp in appearance. Sharp
right.
in like conversation.
Oh, okay.
Like very respectful in the right way, but at the same time confident in themselves. And like honestly, I love being around your team, and
that's great. That's good to hear.
You guys,
we love our team.
Invested in so much, and that's 27 years of hard work.
Yeah.
So, and of course, for some people that have been there for 2 years, it's 2 years of hard work.
Exactly.
5 years.
Yeah.
But what have been kind of like the core ingredients or things that you've really done to put into your team to see what is there now in the leadership of your church?
We started young, and it was super intentional, partly because, well, as intentionally as not, because we just had so many young people, because it's like, okay, you work with what you got, but still to this day, my preference, and this is probably terrible to say publicly, but my preference would be to be with the decades younger than me. Like now it's a lot bigger gap because it's, it's not like I'm 30 and you're 22. It's like I'm 53 and you're 23. Like, and so the gap's bigger, but that's still my preference, because I just think there's so much about investing in that age, particularly because they're so hungry for, they're hungry for mentoring, they're hungry for leadership, they're hungry for doing something. And so I just think that was one of the things you've always done, is invested really young. And that is just, it's recognizing and trying to speak to that potential. So now the challenge is there's quite a bit bigger gap between us and that generation.
You do that so well, though. Like we were just with a pastor last week, who is older than you, that is doing a great job of connecting young.
Phenomenal.
And I don't want to say her name because I don't want to put it out there, but she's just doing a great job of still connecting to the generation. When I say that, like, she would connect to Beck and I so well, but then she would connect like all the way to our kids so well. Like, our kids just love
so amazing.
her. What are some of the things that you think about when you think about how I want to connect? Because sometimes I think people, like, there's things that are important. Like, I think keeping yourself together physically, like healthy, fit, all those. I think that's so important.
Yes, it is.
But like, if those like little small rim glasses are kind of the in thing, if you just think that you can put those on and that's gonna like,
I'm cool now
because I'm wearing a tight pair of pants or whatever,
or my cool shoes,
or your cool shoes, like, it is not gonna work if it's and you can see it from a mile away.
It's so true.
Someone's trying too hard. But you guys have done it in such a good way.
I have, thank you, because I feel like it's one of the areas where it's just like, oh man, I don't want to lose that, because I think the minute we lose that connection to the upcoming generations, I think we're kind of we're missing it as a church, and I think. You might have even written a song about this a long time ago, Jachin, but that whole verse in scripture where it's like, one generation will praise your works to another. Like, that has just always been like an internal mantra, I guess, if you want to call it. Like, it's wrong. It's just like, we want to make sure that we're bringing that generation through.
Generation, praise your works. I remember that one.
You remember that one. But I think it's asking questions.
Bringing it back.
I won't even try to sing it because I still have morning voice. But I think that it's that it's the communication. Right now, it's big for us. It's recognizing that communication, and it is really important. So what does the communication means for the younger generation? Well, I got to learn how to speak social media, and I don't.
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, help me learn how to. Everything is like a language. It's like if I was moving over to France, I would try to figure out eventually how to speak some kind of French to communicate. It may not be my first language, but I would at least learn how to communicate if I was there long term. And I think it's kind of that approach. It's like, how can we keep that communication line open to the generations that are coming up in a way? And so lots of questions. Having my kids in that age group helps a lot.
Sure
so I'm
does.
like, okay, tell me what I'm doing wrong. What do we need to do differently? Where are we looking old? Does my hair look old?
Right,
Change
all
my
that
makeup. Like that's the girl stuff.
Right.
But it's like what do we need to do different? Where are we missing it? And having those conversations, and I think asking a lot of questions.
So good.
Yeah.
And then having people too that have your heart.
Yes.
That are.
Yeah.
Working in those areas as well, because you can't do it all.
No, you can't.
You need multiple layers of leadership.
Yeah, you do. And recognizing each, and trying to actually describe too the values that each generation has and bringing to the table. You see this, and you see this, and this is what you bring. Okay, now this is how you got to listen to these older guys because this is what they bring to the table.
That is so amazing. I could go a few different directions, but I think probably the most helpful would be to women in ministry.
Oh, the women in ministry.
Because we could talk about pastors' kids, because we're both pastors' kids.
Yeah, we were. So
we
many
could talk
stories.
about a lot of stuff. Actually, one of the podcasts I want to do in the future, just listen up, people. It's going to be with my sister.
Oh my gosh, that will be a great one.
It will be the best. I'm just going to let her tell stories for like 45 minutes.
Oh gosh, that'll be great.
If you don't follow my sister on Instagram or Facebook, do it, because she's the best follow.
Follow her cat on Instagram. It's so fun.
But we'll leave that for another time.
That'll be great.
We could do stuff on that, but I just think, when I think of your, city life and what God's doing there, and I think about Mike and what he's called to do, and what you're called to do, it's so unique.
Yeah, it is.
And let me say this, unfortunately unique.
It's a good point.
Because, Mike is in business. He's got his own business. Yeah. And he's full on into that. Yep. And at the same time, you co-lead your church. But really, you're the one at the church a lot of the times, really leading on the ground, many times without him present. Right. And the reason why I say that is unfortunate is because I think there's a lot of people that are called. Right. And their mind isn't open up enough for God to use them in a different way than is typical.
Yes, exactly.
And, even Beck and I have had to face this.
Right.
Because she's got the pressure. She's a piano teacher. And she's got the pressure. Like, man, maybe I should go play the piano because, every pastor's wife plays the piano.
Plays the piano.
And you can sing and I'll play the piano. There's all these stereotypes and types of what kind of is expected and stuff like that. And sometimes I just would like us just to almost clear that off the table.
Absolutely.
So that people can be who they are. Yeah. And out of that would come an example for people to lead. I think that's what's so wonderful about you, Pastor Monica, is that, you have done that. And I know that hasn't been easy at times to do that. Right. Just tell us whatever you want to say. I'm babbling, so just rescue me at this moment.
Rescue you.
But I think what I'm saying is touching a little bit of a nerve to help people go, you are called. Yeah. And it might look different for you than it does for the generation before you or for Becca and I. Yeah. But go for it.
Yeah. I think the biggest kind of, I would say, I'll just use the language, bugs me the most about the church world and the whole women in leadership ministry is that nearly every other sector of our society doesn't have a problem with women in leadership. Some of the biggest corporations in the
Totally.
world are run by women. And it's
Yep.
not even like, oh, should she be there? I don't know. Maybe we'll kind of let her, or
Yep.
we don't have anybody else to step in. And I just think, man, of all of the entities on the planet, I think the church should be leading the way in that, and showing it in a healthy way, showing it in a, not just as you said, this is a unique thing, but
Right.
it should be just as normal. And it's actually, like, I guess the women in leadership, my husband is amazing that
Yep.
he's made that,
Totally.
made that actually a possibility,
Yep.
and not just like as a concession, but championing it. It's
Yep.
just, and he's like, I just don't see why not. Like, and so we've been really intentional with team, and with we've also been intentional too, making sure that we have equal like a strong representation from both men and
Right.
women on the platform, that
Totally.
it's not just, all chick heavy. There's some son, and
Yep.
even the team, I love it when the team catches this, like, we just all chick heavy this morning. It's like,
Right.
oh, we got all guys up there and we got to make some changes. And,
Yep.
so they're catching it. But one of the coolest stories was actually about a week ago when one of our team was having a conversation with their daughter, who's about, I don't know, I think about 11 years old. And I don't know how the conversation went up, but it came into the, around the topic of women and leaders and pastors and da-da-da-da-da. And it kind of came around to, well, that's, I don't know, another church or somewhere else that just wasn't normal. You mean, and they're like,
Right.
the daughter was like, what? Like, why wouldn't a church let a woman
Right.
preach or be a pastor? Like, that's just weird. And I was like, that is the best compliment you could
Yeah.
ever get, is seeing the generation that they just think it's the weirdest. They would think it was how weird
Right.
that men and women wouldn't be leading together
Right.
up front, or, or whatever that looks like. And it's not just, it's always about the up front, but just as an example from our setting, that I think, but I think as for women, and I think even for men, it's recognizing that there's a voice that each of us bring that's very
Right.
different. There's a heart, there's the female heart that the church needs
Yes.
leadership in as
Yep.
well. And it's not just from women. It's like, I think there's something that women can speak to the heart of a man in a way that is different than a man can speak to a woman's heart, in the
Yep.
same way that a dad can speak to a daughter's heart, in the
Right.
same way, in a way that a mom never can
Right.
and never will. And I think it goes both ways. And so I
Totally.
think the house needs both men and women, an equal voice in different capacities that's speaking to that heart, because the church isn't just all men and it's not just all women. It needs both. And I
Right.
think both is what represents God, God's heart, and both represents God, because there's that side. And so I think women, it's not being afraid to step into that, not being afraid to step into that leadership. I would have never done this if I hadn't had people like your dad or
Right.
Brian Thompson saying,
Totally.
you got this. Leadership was the farthest thing from my
they,
radar.
They were
Oh,
champions way
gosh.
before,
Way before.
that was even.
Oh, who was thinking about that?
Yeah.
I had a problem with women in leadership.
Right.
I remember me was like, that's not right, And so, but I think I think guys making where I think actually not just allowing it, but actually opening doors and kind of pushing the women in your world through those doors, whether it's in business, whether it's on a team, whether it's leading a department or leading a church. I think the more that we can do that, and both ways, women opening up the door and pushing the guys through it as well, saying, you got this on you, you need to do this. That I think it goes both ways. We open doors for each other, and
So
we
good.
push when needed.
And people get all caught up in the theological debate
Oh gosh.
of it. And
Yep.
I just go back to the resurrection.
Yes.
Like,
Yep.
if God would choose women
Yep. First ones.
to be the ones that would proclaim
Yep.
a resurrected Christ.
Absolutely.
And then you see the history of the early church. We won't get into all of that.
No.
But like I guess I would like to say, if you're a woman that feels like you got a call of God on your life, I really challenge you to get yourself somehow in the vicinity of women that have led the way.
Absolutely.
And then I would say, to whether you're man or woman, like, I would just say, don't feel pressured by what seems normal
Exactly.
around you.
Yep.
Or the way that it's always been.
Normal's relative.
And like Beck and I have been through that, as like we're different leaders
Right.
than the leaders that went in front of us. And my wife has just had to settle into who she is and lead well.
Which that's
with
where strength
her
comes.
personality,
Yeah.
and just what God's called her to do, and me too.
Yep.
And maybe that's a help to someone out there that just kind of frees you to take a breath today.
Yes.
You know, just go,
Yeah.
I can be who God's called me
Yeah.
to be, and I don't have to be somebody else or try to fit into a mold that doesn't fit my
Right.
life.
So important.
What do you see in the church? I mean, we're Canadian pastors.
Oh,
That is different than an
it
American
is
pastor.
so different.
What do you see in the church, particularly in Canada and even in city life, and what you're in Edmonton now, you're in Leduc, but just some of the hope, some of the just future that you see in the church?
I think in general for Canada, I get excited about looking around and seeing how many young,
Leaders.
sharp leaders pastoring that are planting with, like, they know what they're doing. They're planting with a strategy. They're planting with strength. They're planting with this. We know what we're doing. And I think that I look and I'm excited.
And leading churches too that already existed. Like there's some great pastors.
Exactly. Yep. And so you just see, it's like I looking around, I see there's a lot more, I think, connection, just a natural organic connection. Like they want to connect. It's not so much there's always a place for intentionally building networking, and that's needed, but there's also a lot of almost like a natural connecting and affinity that I see taking place with so many of the young pastors that are, whether they're taking over or transitioning into leadership from an existing church or planning new churches, where you just see this is strong. Like it's exciting. Like the church for Canada, the future is in good hands. Like
it seems to me too that there's less competitive.
Absolutely. Yep.
Stupidness.
Yeah, or we're this and we don't do that, or we're this and we don't associate with that. I think there's you don't see that.
It's really becoming more healthy.
Yeah.
And just even behind the scenes relationships.
Yep.
And
a lot more cheering each other on and genuine. It's not just I'm saying this because this is the right thing to do, and secretly I'm jealous because you're whatever. Like there's but there's that real genuine champion encouragement, and really there's that. The desire for community, I think, is really big. They may not, I think I think the church in the future, I think you got a whole generation that longs for community, might not know how to get it.
Right.
But I think that desire for that, I think, is a good indicator that it's, the church is going to be tighter and closer and more community than what it's ever been.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Pastor
Jachin,
Monica.
this has been fun.
And thank you for all that you're doing in Edmonton and in Leduc.
Oh, well, you guys are rocking
it. Around the country.
Oh, yeah, around the country.
With those, many friends and connections that we're building.
Yeah.
And I'm just so excited about what God's doing.
We're excited for 10 years for you guys here. Oh, man, I am excited.
17 more to go.
Yeah,
we're retiring or something. I'm just joking. We'll do this as
You're
long
here forever.
God calls us.
Yeah.
In some capacity. But thank you so much. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, make sure you share it on social media. Send it to someone who you think might need it. And we just pray God's blessing on you today. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for listening to the Home Church podcast today. We hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure you press subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you'd like, we'd love for you to rate and review our podcast so that other people can hear the impactful message that you just heard.